Welcome you tens to this next video in our linear equations topic, or linear graphing, I should say. So what we are going to do in this particular video, as you can see, is we're going to look at finding the midpoint of an interval. So what I mean by an interval, of course, is if you have two particular coordinates and you connect them with a straight line, I'm finding the very middle point between those two particular points, so between those coordinates, I should say. I've made a little diagram, I guess, of that on the page. I've got two coordinates, one called P, which I've labelled x1, y1, and one called Q, which is x2, y2. Now, the midpoint of that interval I've labelled as M, and you'll often see that done, the midpoint written as M. Now, of course, this is not to scale. I've just done this freehand, so it's not perfect. The reason I'm doing this is I want to show you how we actually find the midpoint, or how we could generate a rule for finding that midpoint. First of all, whenever you're looking at coordinates, you can look at it in terms of the x values and then, of course, in terms of the y values. So if I start to begin with, just with looking at the x values, what I want to find is halfway between this point, which is x1, and this point, which is x2. I need to know what is right in the middle of those two there. Same deal with the y coordinate. So this one here is y1, and over here is y2. And what I need to find is that middle point, because that will give me this y value here. So essentially what I'm asking, or what we ask of you, is to work out what is the middle point between these two numbers, whatever those two numbers might be. Now, to illustrate what we're going to do, I'm going to use a little example. If I said to you, what is the middle point between the numbers 5 and 10? What's the middle of those two numbers? One strategy you might have is to think of what's the distance between them. Then you might split that distance in two. So the distance between this point here and that one there, I'll split that in half, and then I'll add it onto my first value. Some of you may not do that at all, but that's one of the ways I would look at it. So distance between 5 and 10 would be 5, and half of that is 2.5. So obviously, the middle point must be 7.5. Now, there is actually another way of finding that middle point. When you have two numbers, the middle of them is actually going to be equal to the average of those two numbers. So what we can do is find the average of 5 and 10. So add them together, we get 15. 15 on 2 would be 7.5. So essentially what we're going to do is find the average of our two x coordinates for the two, or the x point for the two coordinates, and find the average as well of the y value, because obviously that will be exactly the same process. Now when we do that, instead of using numbers like I have here, I am going to use the x1s and the y1s. And the x2s and y2s, in fact. So what we're going to do is to get the x coordinate. So what I'm doing is writing a giant coordinate at the moment. To get the x coordinate of your midpoint, you're going to find the average of the x1 and x2 values. So average is add them together, divide by however many there are. So comma, so that's my first number that I'm going to get. The second number, the y value that I need, will be the average of the two y values that I've got in my two coordinates, those two coordinates that will be given. And as you can see, we have now a rule for finding the midpoint. Now, of course, we want to see this rule in action, so I'll do that now. Let's go down to this one. I want the midpoint of this interval. So I've got one coordinate to 8 and the other one -1, 2. Now you don't need to draw these to be able to use this particular formula or particular method. I drew it before just to illustrate to you what was going on. Now what I'm going to do is use it. So the midpoint is going to be average of the x's, so that will be divided by 2, and the average of the y's. So obviously we've got x1, y1, x2, y2. Not absolutely necessary to label them, but do so if you need to. All right, so here we have x1 and x2. So we've got 2 and negative 1. And for the y's, we've got 8 and 2. Now we need to evaluate. This one is going to be, so 2 plus negative 1 is to take 1. We're left with half. And 8 plus 2 is 10. 10 on 2, 5. So we've actually got x value of a half would be halfway between the 2 and the negative 1. Yes, that makes sense. And between 8 and 2, the middle point of those two numbers is 5. So, of course, that makes sense as well. So you can check it. You can have a look at the numbers and make sure, yep, it is in the middle of the two, just to make sure that you've evaluated appropriately. I do want to show you one more. Again, these ones won't always be as straightforward as this to start with. Yes, definitely. But sometimes you can have something a little bit different. And here's an example of that. As you can see, M98 is the midpoint of a particular interval. So in this case, we're given the midpoint and we need to find the coordinates of Q. So we've got P, we want to find Q. So what I'll do is I'll set up a little bit of a rule. I know that my midpoint, I know what my midpoint is equal to. So I know that, I'll just write this nice and small so I can fit it in. I know this rule applies. And just say this is x1, y1. Basically, I'm finding x2 and y2. I'll just get rid of that little bracket because I've been a little bit premature there. And my other one, y1 plus y2, and I want the average of those. Now, what I know is this particular coordinate. I know that this, whoops, it's 9, 8. I've put the wrong one in, so be careful. I know it's equal to 9, 8. That's my M value, my midpoint. What I can do now is I can substitute what I do know. I know that x1 is 3. Don't know x2. Finding it. And I know y1 is 9, but I don't know y2. Now what I'm going to do, I might just split the rest of my workings in half so that I can fit it on the page. But you'll see here that I know that the midpoint coordinate for the x's is equal to 9. So what I can do is I can say that 9 is equal to 3 plus the x2 on 2, because I know what that x coordinate in the midpoint is equal to. So this would be 9 by 2 is 18. So x2 must be equal to 15. I'll do the same with my y's. I know that the y coordinate is 8 in my midpoint, and I know that's got to be equal to 9 plus y2 on 2. So 8 2's, so 16 equals 9 plus y2. So of course y2 is equal to 7. That means, I'll just use a different colour so it's nice and clear and move this out the way. Therefore, my coordinate Q is 15, 7. And that would be my final answer there. So as you can see, they can get a little bit more challenging, but if we make use of the rule that we have and we solve accordingly, they aren't too bad. You will need a little bit of practice with this, so that's what we'll use our class time for. All right, thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in class very shortly.